The dust swirled across Marysvale, Utah like a dancer's skirts, as Katherine Zimmerman pressed her back against the weathered wooden wall of her family's small ranch house, clutching the eviction notice with trembling fingers. The year was 1878, and her world was crumbling faster than the parched earth beneath her worn boots. Her mother's funeral had been just 3 days ago, and now this a final demand for payment that would leave her homeless by week's end. "There must be something I can do," Katherine whispered to herself, pushing a strand of honey-brown hair from her face. At 22, she had already weathered more storms than most her father's death in a mining accident 4 years prior. Her brother Thomas lost to typhoid the following winter. And now her mother, claimed by the consumption that had slowly stolen her breath over these past 6 months. Katherine was alone now, truly alone, with nothing but debts and memories. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her quickly fold the notice and tuck it into the pocket of her faded blue dress. Straightening her shoulders, she composed herself as Mr. Hollister, the bank's representative, rode into view. He was a thin, sour-faced man with eyes that reminded her of a snake, cold and calculating. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, tipping his hat with mock politeness as he dismounted. "I trust you've read the notice," Katherine nodded stiffly. "I have, Mr. Hollister, but surely there must be some arrangement we can come to. This land has been in my family for 15 years. My father helped build this town." Hollister's thin lips curved into what might have been a smile on another man's face. On his, it looked predatory. "The bank has been more than patient, Miss Zimmerman. Your mother's medical bills alone." He let the sentence hang in the air between them. "I can work," Katherine said quickly. "I can take in laundry, sewing. The debt is considerable," Hollister interrupted. "Unless you have something of value to offer as collateral, I'm afraid my hands are tied." Katherine's mind raced. There was nothing left. They'd sold the cattle months ago to pay for her mother's medicine. The furniture was worn and worthless. The only thing of value— "Wait here," she said, turning to enter the house before he could respond. Inside, Katherine went directly to the small wooden box on her mother's dresser. Opening it with reverent hands, she withdrew the one treasure her mother had cherished above all else, her wedding ring. The gold band was simple but beautiful, with tiny etchings of flowers circling it. Her father had saved for 2 years to buy it, working extra shifts in the silver mines that had eventually claimed his life. "I'm sorry, Mama," Katherine whispered, pressing the ring to her lips before returning to where Hollister waited. "This," she said, holding out the ring. "It's gold. Pure gold. My father bought it in San Francisco." Hollister took the ring, examining it with keen interest. "This might cover some of the interest," he said, pocketing it before Katherine could protest. "But it's hardly enough. You have until Saturday to vacate the premises, Miss Zimmerman." "But that's not fair," Katherine exclaimed, reaching for the ring. "That's worth more than the bank will determine it's worth," Hollister cut her off coldly. "Consider yourself fortunate I'm taking it at all. Good day, Miss Zimmerman." As he mounted his horse and rode away, Katherine felt something inside her break. The ring, her mother's most treasured possession, the last connection to her father, was gone. And still, she would lose her home. She sank to her knees in the dust, no longer able to hold back the tears that had threatened since she'd received the notice. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard as she wept, unaware that a rider had paused on the ridge overlooking her property, watching the scene unfold. Ruben Sloan pulled his hat lower against the setting sun. His keen eyes narrowed as he observed the young woman crying in the dirt. He'd been riding back to town after delivering a herd of cattle to a ranch north of Marysvale when he'd spotted Hollister leaving the Zimmerman place. He knew Hollister's reputation all too well. The man was a vulture. picking clean the bones of struggling families for the bank's profit and his own. Ruben had only been in Marysvale for 6 months, having drifted in from Colorado after spending years moving cattle across the territories. At 30, he'd seen enough of the West to know when something wasn't right. And the sight of Katherine Zimmerman on her knees in the dust while Hollister rode away smiling told him all he needed to know. With a gentle nudge to his buckskin gelding, Thunder, he continued down the hill toward town. There were things he needed to find out, and quickly. The saloon was crowded when Ruben pushed through the batwing doors that evening. Miners, ranchers, and drifters filled the tables, the air thick with smoke and the smell of whiskey. He made his way to the bar where Sam Peterson, the owner, was pouring drinks. "Evening, Ruben," Sam greeted him. The usual. Ruben nodded, and Sam slid a glass of whiskey across the scarred wooden surface. "Sam, what do you know about the Zimmerman place, east of town?" Sam paused, a bottle still in his hand. "Katherine Zimmerman, poor girl, buried her mother just days ago, last of her family now." "What's Hollister's business with her?" Sam leaned closer, lowering his voice. "The family fell on hard times after her father died in the mines. Her mother got the consumption last year and medical bills piled up. Bank's been looking to foreclose for months." Ruben took a slow sip of his whiskey. "She have any relatives that might help?" "None that I know of. Father was from back east somewhere, mother was local. No siblings left." Sam shook his head. "Damn shame. The Zimmermans were good people, helped build the church, always first to lend a hand when someone was in trouble." Ruben's jaw tightened. He'd seen too many good people driven from their land by men like Hollister. What's she going to do? "Word is she's got till Saturday to clear out. After that." Sam shrugged, his expression grim. Town's full of young women looking for work and not much honest work to be had. Ruben drained his glass, placed it on the bar with a soft thud. "Thanks, Sam. You planning something?" Sam asked, eyeing him curiously. "Just asking questions," Ruben replied, placing a coin on the bar before heading to a table in the corner where Hollister sat with 2 other men, playing cards. Ruben positioned himself at a nearby table, signaling one of the girls for another drink. He listened as Hollister bragged about his day's work. "Got a nice little trinket off the Zimmerman girl," Hollister was saying, pulling a small gold ring from his pocket. "She thought it would save her farm." He laughed, and the sound made Ruben's blood boil. "Might fetch $20 from Jensen at the general store. He's always looking for pretty things for his wife." "What about the land?" one of the other men asked. "Prime location," Hollister replied. "Once we clear the title, Hargrove from Denver is ready to make an offer. His mining company's been wanting to expand operations in this area." Ruben had heard enough. He finished his drink and left the saloon, his mind already formulating a plan. The next morning found Katherine at her kitchen table, staring at the meager pile of coins she'd collected from around the house. It wasn't even enough for a week's stay at the boarding house in town. She'd spent the night alternating between tears and frantic planning, but no solution had presented itself. A knock at the door startled her. She hastily swept the coins into her apron pocket before answering. A tall man with broad shoulders and dark hair stood on her porch, hat in hand. His eyes were a striking shade of blue, his face weathered by sun and wind. She recognized him vaguely as one of the cowboys who sometimes worked for the larger ranches in the area. "Miss Zimmerman?" he asked, his voice deep and respectful. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "My name is Ruben Sloan." "I was hoping I might speak with you about your situation." Katherine stiffened. "My situation is private, Mr. Sloan. I don't recall asking for your concern." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "You didn't, but I overheard some talk in town and I thought I might be able to help." She was about to refuse him outright when he reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar golden band. Katherine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "My mother's ring." "How did you?" "I persuaded Mr. Hollister it was in his best interest to part with it," Ruben said, his expression giving nothing away about the nature of that persuasion. Katherine reached for the ring, but Ruben hesitated before placing it in her palm. "There's something you should know, Miss Zimmerman. This ring won't save your home. Hollister has already promised your land to mining interests from Denver." The hope that had briefly flared in Katherine's chest died. She closed her fingers around the ring, feeling its familiar weight. "Why are you telling me this? Why help me at all?" Ruben shifted, seeming uncomfortable with the question. "I've seen what happens when good people lose everything to men like Hollister. It doesn't sit right with me." "Well, thank you for returning the ring," Katherine said, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after a sleepless night. "It means more to me than you could know." Ruben nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "I might have a proposition for you, Miss Zimmerman. A way you could keep your land." Katherine's eyes narrowed with suspicion. She'd had enough propositions from men since her father died to know most came with strings attached. "What kind of proposition?" "A business arrangement," he said quickly, seeming to sense her wariness. "I've been looking to settle somewhere, start breeding horses. Your land would be suitable, and you know it better than anyone." "You want to buy my land?" Katherine asked, confused. "No, I want to become your partner. I have some savings enough to clear your debt with the bank and get us started. In return, I'd ask for half interest in the ranch and a place to live while we build it up." Katherine stared at him, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Why would you do this? You don't know me." Ruben met her gaze steadily. "I know enough. You're alone and fighting to keep what's yours. I respect that, and I need land to start my business. It could benefit us both. And if I refuse, then I wish you luck," he said simply. "The ring is yours regardless, but my offer stands until Saturday." With that, he tipped his hat and turned to go, leaving Katherine staring after him, the ring clutched tightly in her hand. That evening, Katherine walked into town, determined to learn more about the mysterious Ruben Sloan before considering his offer. Her first stop was the general store where Mrs. Jensen, the proprietor's wife, greeted her warmly. "Katherine, dear, I was so sorry to hear about your mother. Such a lovely woman." "Thank you, Mrs. Jensen," Katherine replied. "I was wondering if you might know anything about a man named Ruben Sloan." Mrs. Jensen's eyes lit up. "The handsome cowboy. Came to town maybe half a year ago. Works as a horse trainer mainly, sometimes helps with cattle drives. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's always polite. Pays his bills on time." She leaned closer. "And he stood up to Bill Turner when he was rough handling young Joey Miller last month. Not many men would cross Turner." Katherine nodded, storing away this information. Bill Turner was the local bully, a large man with a mean streak who intimidated most of the town. Her next stop was the livery stable, where old Mr. Granger was brushing down a horse. "Ruben Sloan," he repeated when Katherine asked. "Good with horses, that one. Never seen a man who could gentle a wild Mustang faster. Fair in his dealings, too. Why do you ask?" "He's offered to help me with my situation," Katherine said carefully. Mr. Granger's bushy eyebrows rose. "Well now, that's interesting. He's not one to get involved in other folks' business usually." He studied her face. "If Sloan offered help, I'd consider it. He's not the kind to make empty promises." By the time Katherine had spoken to 3 more townspeople, including the barber and the blacksmith, she had a consistent picture. Ruben Sloan was respected but private, skilled with horses, fair in his dealings, and not one to seek trouble, though he wouldn't back down from it either. As she walked back home in the fading light, Katherine weighed her options. She could leave Marysvale, try to find work in a larger town like Salt Lake City. But the thought of abandoning the land her parents had worked so hard for made her physically ill. And what sort of work would she find? She had no formal education, no special skills beyond running a household and basic ranch work. Ruben's offer seemed almost too good to be true. But what choice did she have? Saturday was only 2 days away. The next morning, Katherine was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Ruben rode into the yard, looking as calm and composed as he had the day before. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her, dismounting. "I hope I'm not intruding." "I've been thinking about your offer," Katherine said, skipping pleasantries, "and I've been asking around town about you." A hint of amusement crossed his features. "And what did you learn?" "That you're good with horses and pay your bills on time," she replied with a small smile, "and that you stood up to Bill Turner." "Turner needed standing up to," Ruben said simply. Katherine nodded, then took a deep breath. "Before I give you my answer, I need to understand why. Why would you risk your savings on a failing ranch and a partnership with a woman you barely know?" Ruben seemed to consider his words carefully. "I've spent 10 years drifting from job to job, Miss Zimmerman. I've saved every penny I could, always with the dream of having my own place, breeding horses that would make a man proud. But land is expensive, and starting from nothing is harder still." He gestured to the ranch around them. "This place has good water, good grazing, and a sturdy house and barn. It's got everything I need except capital and time to build it up." "And I have neither of those things," Katherine pointed out. "No," he agreed, "but you have knowledge of this land and this community. You have a claim that's legitimate in ways that matter, even if the bank doesn't see it that way." He paused. "I'm offering a fair deal, Miss Zimmerman. I don't want charity, and I don't expect you do either." Katherine studied him for a long moment. Everything in her wanted to believe him, to accept his offer and save her home. But caution held her back. "And what would this partnership look like day to day?" "We'd work the ranch together. I'd handle the horses, you'd keep the house and accounts. Major decisions made together." He hesitated. "I would take the small cabin by the creek to keep things proper." The cabin was where the ranch hands had stayed when her father could afford help. It was simple but sound, with a stone fireplace and a small porch. "And if it doesn't work out?" she asked. "Then after 1 year we sell and split whatever profit there is," he said. "Or one buys the other out." Katherine nodded slowly. It was fair more than fair, and yet— "Why did you get my mother's ring back?" she asked suddenly. "That wasn't part of any business arrangement." For the first time, Ruben looked uncomfortable. "Some things should be respected, Miss Zimmerman. Family heirlooms are one of them." Something in his simple answer touched her more deeply than elaborate explanations might have. Katherine made her decision. "I accept your offer, Mr. Sloan. But I have conditions." "Name them." "This remains my home. You don't bring in other ranch hands without my agreement, and I keep my mother's room untouched, at least for now." "Agreed," Ruben said without hesitation. "Anything else?" Katherine thought for a moment. "I want everything in writing." "A proper contract." Ruben nodded. "We can see the lawyer in town tomorrow morning. I'll bring the money to pay off the bank." "Then I believe we have an arrangement, Mr. Sloan." "Ruben," he corrected her, offering his hand, "if we're to be partners." After a moment's hesitation, Katherine took it. His hand was warm and calloused, his grip firm but not overpowering. "Katherine," she conceded. The next day they rode into town together. Katherine felt the curious stares of townspeople as they made their way to the small law office of Harrison Mills. Within an hour, a partnership agreement was drawn up, signed, and witnessed. Then they walked to the bank. Mr. Hollister's face when they entered together was something Katherine knew she would remember for a long time. His usual smug expression faltered when Ruben placed a heavy pouch of gold coins on his desk. "We're here to settle Miss Zimmerman's debt in full," Ruben stated, his voice level but with an undercurrent of steel. Hollister's eyes darted between them. "There may be additional fees." "There won't be," Ruben interrupted. "The amount is as stated in your notice, plus standard interest. Count it if you wish." While Hollister grudgingly counted the money, Katherine fought to keep her own expression neutral. Part of her could hardly believe this was happening, that her home was being saved, that this virtual stranger was fulfilling his promise. When the transaction was complete and they stepped back into the bright sunlight, Katherine let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "It's done," Ruben said quietly. "The land is secure." "Thank you," Katherine replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how you can help me build a horse ranch," he interrupted with a small smile. "That's repayment enough." As they walked toward their horses, Mrs. Jensen called out from the general store, "Katherine, a moment, please." Katherine approached the older woman, who was looking between her and Ruben with undisguised curiosity. "I heard you two visited Mr. Mills this morning," Mrs. Jensen said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Is there to be a wedding, dear?" Katherine felt heat rush to her face. No, Mrs. Jensen. "Mr. Sloan and I have formed a business partnership. He's going to help me run the ranch." Mrs. Jensen's eyebrows rose dramatically. "A partnership with an unmarried man? My goodness, Katherine, what would your mother say?" Before Katherine could respond, Ruben stepped forward. "Mrs. Jensen, I'll be staying in the creek cabin, a respectable distance from the main house. Katherine's reputation will remain untarnished, I assure you." The older woman looked unconvinced. "Well, people will talk regardless. You mark my words." As they rode home, Katherine was quiet, Mrs. Jensen's words weighing on her mind. She hadn't considered how the town would view their arrangement. In the practical matters of saving her home and forming a business partnership, she'd overlooked the social implications. "You're worried about what she said," Ruben observed, breaking the silence. Katherine sighed. "I hadn't thought about how it would look, a single woman and man living on the same property." "If it becomes a problem, we can consider alternatives," Ruben said. "But right now, we need to focus on making the ranch profitable. The rest will sort itself out." Katherine nodded, hoping he was right. The last thing she needed was to save her land only to lose her standing in the community that had been her home her entire life. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Ruben moved his few possessions into the creek cabin and immediately set to work repairing fences and clearing the south pasture for the horses he planned to bring in. Katherine found herself rising earlier each day, preparing breakfast for them both before tackling her own chores. They ate most meals together, either on the porch of the main house or at the kitchen table if the weather turned. At first, their conversations were strictly about the ranch, what needed fixing, what supplies they needed from town, plans for breeding stock. But gradually, as the days passed, they began to share more of themselves. Katherine learned that Ruben had grown up in Missouri, the son of a horse trader. He'd left home at 16 after his father's death, working his way west with various cattle outfits and horse traders. He'd fought briefly in the war before it ended, though he didn't speak much about that time. In turn, she told him about growing up in Marysvale, about her father's dreams for the ranch and her mother's quiet strength. She shared stories of her brother Thomas, who had been quick to laugh and full of mischief before typhoid took him. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Ruben asked about her mother's ring. "It must be very special to you," he observed. Katherine touched the ring, which she now wore on a ribbon around her neck. "It was the only valuable thing my mother owned. My father saved for 2 years to buy it for her. He traveled all the way to San Francisco to find something worthy of her. They must have loved each other very much." "They did," Katherine smiled at the memory. "Even after 15 years of marriage, my father would still bring her wildflowers for no reason, and my mother kept every one of his letters from when he went to California to buy cattle." Her smile faded. "I still have those letters. I read them sometimes to remember his voice." Ruben was quiet for a moment. "My parents had a different sort of marriage, practical, respectful, but not." He seemed to search for the word, "not romantic." "My father was a hard man, fair but stern. My mother did her duty." "That sounds lonely," Katherine said softly. "It was what they knew," Ruben replied with a shrug. "But I always thought if I ever married, I'd want something different." Their eyes met briefly in the fading light before both looked away. As June turned to July, the ranch began to transform. Ruben brought in 6 mares and a stallion, the beginning of their breeding stock. He spent hours each day working with the horses, his patience and skill evident in the way the animals responded to him. Katherine found herself pausing in her chores, sometimes just to watch him work, admiring the fluid way he moved, the quiet confidence in his hands. The town's initial gossip about their arrangement had mostly died down, though Katherine still noticed the occasional raised eyebrow when they rode in together for supplies. Mrs. Peterson, the preacher's wife, had taken to asking pointed questions about their unusual situation whenever they attended Sunday services. "People will always talk," Ruben told her one Sunday as they rode home from church. "Eventually, they'll find something more interesting to discuss." "I hope you're right," Katherine sighed. "Mrs. Peterson cornered me after the service to tell me that business partnerships between unmarried persons invite moral decay." Ruben's laugh was unexpected and rich. "Moral decay, from fixing fences and breeding horses." Katherine couldn't help but smile. "Apparently so." "Well, I suppose we could give them something real to talk about," he suggested, his blue eyes twinkling with mischief. "Mr. Sloan," Katherine exclaimed in mock outrage, "are you attempting to compromise my virtue?" "Never," he replied, suddenly serious. "Your virtue is safe with me, Katherine. Always." The sincerity in his voice made her heart skip a beat. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder what it might be like if their partnership were of a different nature entirely. In early August, disaster struck. Katherine woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of Ruben shouting her name. She rushed outside in her nightdress to find the barn engulfed in flames, Ruben frantically leading horses out of the inferno. Without hesitation, she ran to help, grabbing the reins of a panicked mare and pulling her to safety. Together they managed to save all the horses, but the barn was lost, collapsing in a shower of sparks just as the first neighbors arrived to help. By dawn, all that remained was smoking ruins. Katherine stood staring at the destruction, numb with shock. The barn had been one of the first structures her father had built, its heavy beams cut from trees on their own land. "We'll rebuild," Ruben said quietly, coming to stand beside her. His face was streaked with soot, his shirt singed in places, stronger than before. "How?" Katherine whispered. "We put everything into the horses. We don't have money for lumber for nails." "We'll find a way," Ruben insisted, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. "I promise you, Katherine, we will not lose what we've built." The touch of his hand anchored her, gave her strength when she felt like crumbling. She squeezed back, holding on as if he were a lifeline in a storm. News of the fire spread quickly through the town. By afternoon, wagons began arriving at the ranch, neighbors bringing lumber salvaged from their own projects, tools, food, and offers of help. Mr. Granger from the livery brought a temporary corral for the horses. Even Mrs. Peterson appeared with a basket of bread and preserves. "We take care of our own in Marysvale," she told Katherine, her earlier disapproval apparently forgotten. "Always have." For 3 days, people came and went, men working from sunrise to sunset to clear the debris and begin framing a new barn. Women set up a cooking area, keeping everyone fed with stews and biscuits and apple pies. Children carried water and ran errands. Katherine worked alongside everyone else, her heart full at the generosity of her neighbors. On the second evening, as she was serving coffee to the workers, she overheard Mr. Johnson, the blacksmith, talking to Ruben. "You've done right by her," Johnson was saying. "Taking on this place, helping her keep it. Not many would have." "I didn't do it for praise," Ruben replied, hammering a nail into place. "No, I expect not," Johnson agreed. "But the town's noticed all the same. The way you look at her, too." Katherine froze, coffee pot in hand, her heart suddenly racing. "And how's that?" Ruben asked, his voice carefully neutral. Johnson chuckled. "Like a man who's found something he didn't know he was looking for." Katherine didn't hear Ruben's response, if there was one. She hurried away, her cheeks burning, confused by the fluttering feeling in her stomach. That night, alone in her bedroom, Katherine found herself standing before the small mirror on her dresser, studying her reflection. She was thinner than she had been before her mother's illness, her face more angular. Her honey-brown hair was pulled back in a simple braid, her green eyes tired but bright. She wondered, for the first time in months, how she appeared to others, to Ruben. Did he look at her the way Mr. Johnson suggested? And if he did, how did she feel about that? The answer came with surprising clarity. Hopeful. She felt hopeful. Somewhere in the weeks of working together, of sharing meals and stories and dreams, Katherine had begun to care for Ruben Sloan as more than a business partner. His quiet strength, his unwavering support, his rare but wonderful smile, all had worked their way into her heart when she wasn't looking. But what could come of it? Their arrangement was clear, their partnership professional. And she had no indication that Ruben wanted anything more, Johnson's observations notwithstanding. The barn raising concluded on the third day with a celebration. Tables were set up in the yard, loaded with food and drink. Someone brought a fiddle, and soon couples were dancing in the cleared area before the new barn. Katherine found herself swept into the festivities, dancing with various neighbors, laughing more than she had in months. When the music slowed, she felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to find Ruben standing there, hand extended. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his expression unreadable. Katherine nodded, placing her hand in his. His other hand came to rest lightly at her waist as they began to move with the music. She was acutely aware of his nearness, of the strength in his arms and the scent of pine and leather that seemed to cling to him. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For saving the horses for the barn, for—" She paused, "for believing this place could be saved when I had almost given up hope." Ruben's gaze held hers, something warm and intense in his blue eyes. "This land is special, Katherine, but not as special as the woman who belongs to it." Her breath caught at his words. "Ruben, Katherine," Mrs. Jensen's voice broke the moment. "Come, dear, we're cutting the cake." The moment was lost, and Katherine found herself pulled away to help serve dessert. When she looked for Ruben later, he was deep in conversation with some of the men about plans for the fall cattle drive. September brought cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color to the mountains surrounding Marysvale. It also brought an unexpected visitor to the ranch. Katherine was hanging laundry when a fancy carriage pulled up the drive. A well-dressed man in his 50s stepped down, surveying the property with keen interest. "Miss Zimmerman," he called, approaching her. "My name is Edward Hargrove. I believe we have matters to discuss." Katherine frowned, not recognizing the name. "What matters would those be, Mr. Hargrove? The sale of your property, of course," he replied smoothly. "I had an arrangement with the bank some months ago, but it seems there was a complication." His gaze swept over the ranch, lingering on the new barn. "I'm prepared to offer you a very generous sum, considerably more than you paid to clear your debt." Understanding dawned on Katherine. This was the mining interest Hollister had mentioned to Ruben. "My ranch isn't for sale, Mr. Hargrove." The man's pleasant expression tightened slightly. "Everyone has a price, Miss Zimmerman. Name yours." "She said the ranch isn't for sale." Ruben's voice came from behind them. He'd approached silently, leading one of the horses. "And now I'm saying it too." Hargrove turned, assessing Ruben with cold calculation. "Ah, you must be Sloan. Hollister mentioned you'd interfered in our arrangement." He reached into his coat pocket, withdrew an envelope. "Perhaps this will change your mind. It's double what this land is worth for ranching." "But not what it's worth for mining," Ruben replied evenly. "We're not interested." Hargrove's pleasant facade slipped further. "Don't be foolish. This is hill country barely suitable for cattle. The real value is beneath the soil." "The real value," Katherine said, stepping forward, "is in the home my parents built, the land they loved. That's not for sale at any price." Hargrove looked between them, his expression hardening. "You're making a mistake. I won't offer again." "Good day, Mr. Hargrove," Ruben said firmly, his posture making clear the conversation was over. After the man had driven away, Katherine turned to Ruben. "He seemed very confident he could buy us out." "Men like that always are," Ruben replied. "They're used to getting their way." What did he mean about the real value being beneath the soil? Ruben hesitated. "I've heard rumors that there might be new silver deposits in this area. Nothing confirmed, but enough to interest men like Hargrove." "You think that's why Hollister was so eager to foreclose?" "To sell to the mining interests. It would explain his hurry," Ruben nodded. "And why he was willing to take your mother's ring as partial payment, but not as a reason to extend your time." Katherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "Will Hargrove cause trouble, do you think?" "Possibly," Ruben admitted. "But we're on solid legal ground now. He can't force us to sell." That night, Katherine had trouble sleeping. The encounter with Hargrove had unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She eventually rose and went to the kitchen for a cup of tea. Through the window, she noticed a light in the creek cabin. Ruben was awake too. Without really thinking about it, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. The night was clear and cool, the moon nearly full. Katherine followed the familiar path to the cabin, hesitating only when she reached the door. This was the first time she'd come to Ruben's private space since he'd moved in. Before she could knock, the door opened. Ruben stood there, surprise evident on his face. "Katherine." "Is everything all right?" "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "I saw your light." He stepped back, gesturing her inside. "Come in. I was just going over some figures for the horses." The cabin was simple but neat. A desk stood in one corner with papers spread across it. A narrow bed was against the opposite wall, neatly made. A small stove provided heat and a few books were stacked on a shelf. "Tea," he offered, moving to the stove. "Please." As he prepared the tea, Katherine noticed a worn photograph on the desk. Curious, she moved closer. It showed a young woman, perhaps 18, with a serious expression and dark hair arranged in an elaborate style popular a decade earlier. "My sister, Rebecca," Ruben said, noticing her interest. "That was taken before I left home." "You've never mentioned a sister," Katherine said, accepting the mug of tea he offered. A shadow crossed his face. "We lost touch after I headed west, my leaving. It didn't sit well with her or with my mother." "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly. "Family rifts are painful." Ruben nodded, gesturing for her to sit in one of the 2 chairs by the stove. "It was a long time ago. Rebecca would be married with children of her own by now, I expect. You've never thought of going back to see her?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But Missouri is a long way, and the past has a way of staying where it belongs." He changed the subject. "Now, what's keeping you awake, Hargrove?" Katherine nodded. "I keep thinking about what he said about the land's real value, if there is silver here." "Then nothing changes," Ruben said firmly. "This is our home, our ranch. We're building something here, Katherine, our home, our ranch." The words warmed her more than the tea or the stove's heat. "Yes," she agreed, "we are." They talked for another hour, the conversation moving to lighter topics: plans for a small apple orchard, the progress of the colt born 2 weeks earlier, a recipe Katherine wanted to try. When she finally rose to leave, she felt calm in a way she hadn't since Hargrove's visit. At the door, Ruben surprised her by taking her hand. "Katherine," he said, his voice low, "I want you to know that whatever comes, Hargrove, the mine, anything, we'll face it together. I made you a promise when we formed this partnership, and I intend to keep it." The intensity in his eyes made her heart race. "I know," she whispered. "I trust you, Ruben." For a moment she thought he might say more, might even lean down to kiss her, but he simply squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "Good night, Katherine." "Good night, Ruben," she replied, slipping out into the moonlight with her thoughts in turmoil. October brought the cattle drive, with ranchers from all around bringing their stock to be driven south to the railhead. Ruben was asked to help, his skill with horses making him valuable on the long journey. "I'll be gone 3 weeks, maybe 4, he told Katherine the night before he was to leave. "Will you be all right here alone?" "I managed this place by myself before you came," she reminded him with a smile. "I can certainly handle it while you're gone. All the same, I've asked Mr. Granger to check in on you, and Johnson said he'd ride by every few days." Katherine was touched by his concern. "I'll be fine, Ruben, really." "I know you will," he said. Then, reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I wanted to give you this before I left." Curious, Katherine unwrapped it to find a small silver whistle on a chain. "It's beautiful," she said, running her finger over the intricate engravings of flowers that covered its surface. "It's loud, too," Ruben said. "If there's trouble, any trouble at all, you blow that whistle. It'll bring help from half a mile away." Katherine slipped the chain over her head, the whistle resting alongside her mother's ring. "Thank you." The morning Ruben left with the other drovers was gray and misty. Katherine stood in the yard, watching as he checked his saddle one last time, secured his bedroll, and made sure his canteen was full. "Remember, Johnson will be by on Wednesday and Granger on Sunday," Ruben said, swinging up onto Thunder's back. "And the whistle will bring help from half a mile away," Katherine finished for him with a smile. "I remember. Be safe, Ruben." He looked down at her, something unspoken in his eyes. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he promised. And then he was gone, riding down the drive to join the other men and the large herd of cattle that would make the journey south. The first week of Ruben's absence passed uneventfully. Katherine kept busy with her usual chores, plus some of Ruben's. She checked the horses daily, mended fences, and began preparing the house for winter. On the 9th day, she was in the barn when she heard a wagon approaching. Thinking it might be Mr. Johnson making his promised visit, she stepped outside, only to freeze at the sight of Edward Hargrove climbing down from an expensive buggy. He was accompanied by 2 rough-looking men who remained seated in the vehicle. "Miss Zimmerman," Hargrove greeted her, his smile not reaching his eyes. "I was in the area and thought I'd stop by to see if you'd reconsidered my offer." "My answer hasn't changed, Mr. Hargrove," Katherine replied coolly. The ranch isn't for sale." Hargrove sighed, as if disappointed in a child. "I had hoped you might be more reasonable without Sloan's influence. It seems I was mistaken." He glanced around. "Where is your partner, by the way? I don't see him about." Catherine's hand moved instinctively to the whistle beneath her dress. "Mr. Sloan is nearby," she lied. "He'll be back any moment." "Is that so?" Hargrove's tone made it clear he didn't believe her. "My sources tell me he joined the cattle drive to the south. Won't be back for weeks yet." The cold calculation in his eyes made Katherine take a step back. "What do you want, Mr. Hargrove?" "What I've always wanted. This land." He gestured to the men in the buggy. "My associates and I are prepared to stake mining claims all around your property. We'll divert the creek, run day and night operations that will make raising horses impossible. Or," his voice softened to a silky persuasiveness, "you can accept my very generous offer now before things become unpleasant." Katherine felt fear curling in her stomach, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "This is my home, Mr. Hargrove. I won't be bullied out of it." Hargrove's face hardened. "I had hoped for a civil resolution, Miss Zimmerman. Remember that when you're watching your dreams crumble around you." He turned back to the buggy, then paused. "1 week. I'll give you 1 week to reconsider after that." He left the threat hanging as he rejoined his men and drove away. As soon as they were out of sight, Katherine ran to the house, her hands shaking as she bolted the door behind her. Hargrove's threats echoed in her mind. Could he really surround their property with mining operations? Divert the creek they relied on for water? She wished desperately that Ruben were here. He would know what to do, what legal protections they might have. But Ruben was days away with no way to reach him. Katherine paced the kitchen, trying to think. She could ride into town, speak with Mr. Mills about their legal options. But that would mean leaving the ranch unattended, something she was loath to do with Hargrove's men in the area. In the end, she decided to wait for Mr. Johnson's visit the next day. He was well respected in town and might have advice on how to proceed. But Mr. Johnson didn't come the next day, or the day after. When Mr. Granger failed to appear for his Sunday visit, Katherine knew something was wrong. Had Hargrove somehow interfered with her neighbor's intentions to check on her? On the 4th day after Hargrove's visit, Katherine woke to the sound of heavy machinery. Rushing outside, she saw with horror that equipment was being set up just beyond her property line, near the creek that provided water for the ranch. Men were unloading parts of what looked like a sluice box and other mining implements. Hargrove stood supervising, a satisfied smile on his face when he spotted her. "Good morning, Miss Zimmerman," he called. "As you can see, we're proceeding with our operations. Last chance to accept my offer before things get truly uncomfortable for you. You can't do this." Katherine shouted, striding toward him. "The creek doesn't just serve my land. There are other ranches downstream that depend on that water." "All legal, I assure you," Hargrove replied smoothly. "I've filed the proper mining claims. Water rights in this territory favor mineral extraction over agriculture. A pity, but there it is." Katherine looked at the equipment with growing despair. If they diverted the creek or polluted it with mining runoff, the ranch would be untenable. Without clean water, the horses couldn't thrive, crops wouldn't grow. "This is wrong, and you know it," she said, her voice shaking with anger. Hargrove merely shrugged. "Business, Miss Zimmerman, sometimes it's messy. My offer remains open for now." Katherine turned and walked back to the house, her mind racing. She needed help, and quickly. Ruben wouldn't be back for at least another week. She had to act on her own. Saddling her mare, she rode into town, determination hardening her resolve. Her first stop was the law office of Harrison Mills. Mining claims do indeed take precedence over agricultural water rights in many cases. Mills confirmed after hearing her story. But there are limitations. They can't completely deny you access to water, and they're required to prevent contamination of drinking sources. "Can you help me stop them?" Katherine asked. Mills looked uncomfortable. "I can file protests, but these things take time, Miss Zimmerman, and Hargrove has connections in the territorial capital. So there's nothing to be done." Katherine couldn't keep the desperation from her voice. "I didn't say that," Mills replied carefully, "but legal channels may be too slow to prevent immediate damage." He hesitated. "There's been talk in town about Hargrove's men intimidating local ranchers. Mr. Johnson was warned off visiting you, and Granger found his stable damaged after he spoke against the mining operations at a town meeting." Katherine's heart sank. "So Hargrove is willing to resort to threats and vandalism to get what he wants." "So it would seem," Mills agreed. "You might be safer staying in town until Sloan returns." But Katherine shook her head firmly. "I won't abandon my home. That's exactly what Hargrove wants." Her next stop was the sheriff's office, but she found little help there. Sheriff Davies listened to her story with apparent sympathy, but offered only vague assurances that he would look into the matter. As Katherine prepared to leave town, she was approached by Sam Peterson from the saloon. "Miss Zimmerman," he called, hurrying to catch up with her. "A word, if I may." "Of course, Mr. Peterson." The saloon-keeper glanced around nervously before speaking in a low voice. "I overheard some of Hargrove's men talking last night. They're planning something at your ranch, something more than just mining operations." Katherine's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "I couldn't hear everything, but they mentioned a fire, making it look like an accident." Peterson's expression was grim. "These aren't decent men, Miss Zimmerman. They've done this before in other territories, drive people out by any means necessary." "A fire," Katherine repeated, remembering the barn burning earlier that summer. Had that been Hargrove's doing as well? "Thank you for telling me, Mr. Peterson. Be careful," he urged, "and if you need help, send word. There are those in town who won't stand by while Hargrove runs roughshod over honest folk." Katherine rode home with a heavy heart but a determined spirit. If Hargrove thought he could frighten her off her land, he was mistaken. This was her home, her heritage. She wouldn't give it up without a fight. For the next 2 days, Katherine kept a loaded rifle nearby at all times. She moved the horses to the pasture furthest from the creek, where Hargrove's men were working. At night, she slept only in short intervals, waking frequently to check for any sign of intruders. On the 3rd night, her vigilance was rewarded. She was woken by the sound of voices outside the barn. Grabbing her rifle, she crept to the window and saw 3 men approaching the structure, one carrying what appeared to be a kerosene can. Without hesitation, Katherine reached for the silver whistle Ruben had given her. She blew 3 sharp blasts, the sound piercing the night air. The men froze, then began running toward their horses tied nearby. Katherine threw open the window and fired the rifle into the air. "The next shot won't be a warning," she shouted. The men scrambled onto their mounts and rode off into the darkness. Katherine kept watching, her heart pounding, wondering if they would return with reinforcements. But the night remained quiet. In the morning, she found the kerosene can they had dropped in their hasty retreat. It was all the evidence she needed of their intentions. She was securing the barn when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Raising her rifle, Katherine braced herself for another confrontation. But it was Mr. Johnson and 5 other men from town who rode into the yard. "We heard the whistle last night," Johnson explained as he dismounted. "Would have been here sooner, but it took time to gather the men." Relief washed over Katherine. "Thank you. Hargrove's men were going to burn the barn." "That doesn't surprise me," Johnson growled. "Hargrove's got a reputation for playing dirty." He gestured to the other men. "We're here to help, Miss Zimmerman. We'll take turns keeping watch until Sloan returns." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes at this show of community support. "I don't know how to thank you all." "No need," one of the other men, a rancher named Cooper, replied. "We take care of our own in Marysvale. Always have." With the townsmen standing guard, Hargrove's men kept their distance over the next few days. The mining operation continued at the creek, but no further attempts were made to damage the ranch directly. On the morning of the 6th day after Hargrove's ultimatum, Katherine was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for Johnson and Cooper, who had taken the night watch, when she heard excited shouts from outside. Looking through the window, she saw a cloud of dust on the road, kicked up by approaching riders. For a moment, she feared it was Hargrove with more men. But as the riders drew closer, she recognized Ruben at their head, riding hard toward the ranch. Katherine ran outside, her heart leaping at the sight of him. Ruben dismounted before thunder had fully stopped, striding toward her with urgent purpose. "Are you all right?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her for any sign of harm. "I heard about Hargrove's threats when we reached the railhead. I rode back as fast as I could." "I'm fine," Katherine assured him, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after days of stress and little sleep. "Mr. Johnson and the others have been helping keep watch." Ruben nodded to the men, gratitude evident in his expression. "Thank you. I won't forget this." He turned back to Katherine. "Hargrove, he set up mining operations by the creek," she explained, "and his men tried to burn the barn 3 nights ago." A dangerous look crossed Ruben's face. "Did they now, Ruben?" Katherine said, placing a hand on his arm. "What are we going to do? Mills says the legal options might take too long and the sheriff seems reluctant to intervene." "First," Ruben said, covering her hand with his own, "you're going to rest. You look exhausted. Then we're going to deal with Hargrove permanently." True to his word, Ruben insisted Katherine sleep while he and the townsmen discussed strategy. When she woke several hours later, she found Ruben at the kitchen table, cleaning his revolver. "Feel better?" he asked, looking up as she entered. "Much," she admitted. "What have you decided?" "We're going to pay Hargrove a visit," Ruben said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of steel. "All of us. Show him that Marysvale stands together." "When?" "Now." Ruben stood, holstering his weapon. "Johnson's gathered more men from town. Even the sheriff's decided to join us. Seems he's had complaints from other ranchers about the water being fouled downstream." Katherine's heart raced. "I'm coming too." Ruben looked as if he might argue, then nodded. "It's your ranch, your fight as much as mine." 20 riders accompanied them to the mining camp. Ranchers, shopkeepers, the blacksmith, and Sheriff Davies, who had finally found his courage. They rode in formation, a show of unified strength that made Katherine's heart swell with pride for her community. Hargrove was directing operations when they arrived, his face registering first surprise, then alarm at the size of their group. "What's the meaning of this?" he demanded as Ruben and Katherine dismounted, followed by the sheriff. "We've come to discuss your operations, Mr. Hargrove," Ruben said evenly, "and the attempted arson at our ranch." "I don't know what you're talking about," Hargrove blustered, though his eyes shifted nervously. 3 men with kerosene," Katherine said. "They dropped this when they ran." She held up the can they had abandoned. "Your men, Mr. Hargrove." Sheriff Davies stepped forward. "I've had complaints about water contamination downstream, Hargrove, and threats against local ranchers. That's enough for me to shut down your operation pending investigation." "You can't do that." Hargrove protested. "I have legal mining claims. Claims obtained through manipulation and threats aren't worth the paper they're written on," Ruben countered. "We have witnesses who will testify to your methods." Hargrove's face reddened with anger. "This is outrageous." I'll have the territorial governor intervene. You're welcome to try, Sheriff Davies said. But in the meantime, you and your men will cease operations and leave Marysvale. Today. Hargrove looked at the determined faces surrounding him, clearly calculating his odds. Finally, he gave a terse nod. This isn't over, he warned. You haven't heard the last from me. Perhaps not, Ruben agreed. But for now, you'll dismantle this equipment and clear out, or we'll do it for you. Under the watchful eyes of the townspeople, Hargrove's men begrudgingly began packing up their operation. By sunset, they were gone, leaving only churned earth and muddy water as evidence of their presence. As the group rode back to town, Katherine found herself overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she said to no one in particular. "All of you." "Like I said before," Cooper replied with a grin, "we take care of our own." That night, after everyone had gone and the ranch was quiet once more, Katherine and Ruben sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "I was so frightened when I heard what was happening," Ruben admitted, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "The thought of you here alone, facing Hargrove and his men." "I wasn't alone," Katherine reminded him. "The town rallied around us, around me. Even so." Ruben's voice was tight with emotion. "When I think of what might have happened if you hadn't had that whistle, if Johnson and the others hadn't come." Katherine turned to look at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "But nothing did happen. I'm fine. The ranch is safe." "This time," Ruben said. "But Hargrove won't give up easily. Men like him never do." "Then we'll face him together," Katherine replied. "Just as you promised we would." Ruben was silent for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with something. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and earnest. "Katherine, when I thought you might be in danger, I realized something. Something I think I've known for months but wasn't ready to acknowledge." Katherine's heart began to race. "What did you realize?" "That this partnership we've built, this ranch we're creating together, it's become more to me than just a business arrangement." His blue eyes met hers in the fading light. "You've become more to me." Katherine felt breathless, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Ruben." He took her hand gently in his. "I don't have much to offer beyond what you see. I'm not a wealthy man, not educated like some, but I care for you, Katherine, deeply, more than I thought possible." Joy welled up inside her, bright and overwhelming. "I care for you too," she whispered. "I have for some time now." The smile that spread across Ruben's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward. When his lips met hers, Katherine felt as though every star in the sky had fallen to earth, lighting her from within. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but grew in confidence as Katherine responded, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. When they finally parted, both were breathing unsteadily. "I've wanted to do that for months," Ruben admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Why didn't you?" Katherine asked. "I didn't want to complicate our arrangement, and I wasn't sure if you felt the same way." He smiled ruefully. "It took nearly losing you to make me realize some risks are worth taking." Katherine laughed softly. "For a man so brave in other areas, you were quite cautious in this one." "Love makes cowards of the bravest men," Ruben replied, then looked startled at his own words. "Love," Katherine repeated, her heart soaring at the word. Ruben's expression grew serious. "Yes, love." "I love you, Katherine Zimmerman. I think I have almost from the first day when you stood so proud and determined despite everything working against you." Tears of happiness filled Katherine's eyes. "I love you too, Ruben Sloan, with all my heart." This time when they kissed, it was with the certainty of shared feeling, of a future unfolding before them bright with promise. November brought the first snow to the mountains around Marysvale, and with it, preparations for winter. The ranch had settled back into a rhythm after the confrontation with Hargrove, though Ruben insisted on keeping a vigilant watch. The mining equipment was gone, the creek flowing clear again, but Hargrove's final warning lingered in their minds. What had changed was the relationship between Katherine and Ruben. No longer just business partners, they now moved through their days with the special awareness of two people deeply in love. They still maintained separate living quarters, Ruben in the creek cabin, Katherine in the main house, but they spent every possible moment together. The town had noticed the change, of course. Mrs. Peterson had taken to asking pointed questions about their intentions whenever they attended Sunday services, while Mrs. Jensen simply beamed at them with maternal approval. "They're all waiting for us to announce a wedding date," Katherine observed one evening as they sat by the fire in the main house, going over the ranch accounts. "Mrs. Peterson all but asked me directly today." Ruben looked up from the ledger, his expression thoughtful. "Would that be so terrible?" "If we did announce a wedding date," Katherine's heart skipped a beat. "Are you asking me to marry you, Ruben Sloan?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I believe I am, though I had planned something more romantic than an accounting session by the fire." Katherine laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "I don't need romance, I just need you." Ruben set the ledger aside and moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "Katherine Zimmerman, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of happiness filled Katherine's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." Ruben's smile was radiant as he leaned forward to kiss her, sealing their promise to each other. They set the date for the first Saturday in December, a small ceremony in the town church, followed by a celebration at the ranch. The whole town seemed to join in the preparations, bringing food and decorations and offers of help. 3 days before the wedding, Katherine was in town finalizing arrangements with the preacher when she spotted a familiar figure entering the bank. Edward Hargrove had returned to Marysvale. Heart pounding, she hurried to finish her business with the preacher and then made her way to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Davies listened to her news with a grim expression. "I'll keep an eye on him," he promised. "But unless he breaks the law, there's not much I can do." "Just watch the ranch," Katherine urged. "I don't trust him not to try something." When she returned home and told Ruben of Hargrove's return, his expression darkened. "I'll talk to Johnson and Cooper, make sure we have extra eyes on the property until the wedding." "Do you think he would really try something now, with the whole town supporting us?" "Men like Hargrove don't give up easily," Ruben said. "And he's had time to plan. We need to be careful." The next day brought an unexpected development. Mr. Mills, the lawyer, rode out to the ranch with news. "Hargrove is filing legal challenges to your partnership agreement," he informed them gravely. "He's claiming it was formed under false pretenses, that the debt to the bank wasn't properly settled." "That's absurd," Ruben protested. "We have the documentation, witnesses." "I know," Mills agreed. "And his case is weak, but it could tie things up in court for months, even years." Katherine felt sick at the thought. "Can he really do this?" "He can try," Mills replied. "But I have some news that might help. I've been doing some research into Hargrove's previous operations. He's left a trail of similar disputes across Colorado and Nevada. In at least 2 cases, there were suspicious fires that drove ranchers off valuable land." "Like he tried here," Katherine said. Mills nodded. "Exactly. I've contacted authorities in those territories. If we can establish a pattern, it could discredit his claims against you and possibly lead to criminal charges." "How long will that take?" Ruben asked. "Time," Mills admitted. "But in the meantime, I suggest you proceed with your wedding as planned." A marriage would strengthen your legal position considerably. After Mills left, Katherine and Ruben discussed this new development. "He's trying to intimidate us again," Ruben said. "Using legal means this time, but the goal is the same: to drive us off the land." "Then we won't let him," Katherine replied with determination. "We'll marry as planned, and we'll fight his legal challenges every step of the way." The day before the wedding dawned clear and cold. The ranch was a flurry of activity as final preparations were made. Tables were set up in the barn, now decorated with pine boughs and ribbons. Women from town arrived with pies and cakes, while men constructed a dance floor. Katherine was in the kitchen with Mrs. Jensen and several other women, finalizing the wedding feast when a rider galloped into the yard. It was Cooper's youngest son, his face flushed with exertion. "Miss Zimmerman," he called as Katherine stepped onto the porch. "Pa sent me to warn you. Hargrove's been in the saloon, drinking and talking big. Says he's got something planned that'll make you and Mr. Sloan forget about getting married." Katherine's blood ran cold. "Where's Ruben?" "Out checking the north pasture fence with my pa and some others," the boy replied. "They sent me to warn you while they keep watch." Katherine thanked him and hurried back to the kitchen. "Mrs. Jensen, I need to find Sheriff Davies. Can you stay here until I return?" "Of course, dear," the older woman replied, concern evident in her face. "Is everything all right?" "Just a precaution," Katherine assured her, not wanting to alarm everyone. She saddled her mare and rode into town as fast as the snowy roads would allow. She found the sheriff in his office, already preparing to ride out to the ranch. "Just got word from Peterson at the saloon," he explained. "Hargrove's been drinking and making threats. I was coming to warn you." "We need to find him," Katherine insisted, "before he can do whatever he's planning." But a search of the town revealed no sign of Hargrove or his men. They had left the saloon hours earlier, according to Peterson, heading in the direction of the ranch. With growing alarm, Katherine and the sheriff rode back, pushing their horses through the falling snow. As they crested the final hill, Katherine gasped at the sight before her. Smoke was rising from the creek cabin, Ruben's home. "No," Katherine cried, spurring her horse forward, but the sheriff caught her reins. "Wait," he cautioned. "It could be a trap." They approached more cautiously, circling wide to come in from the direction of the main house. As they drew closer, Katherine could see that the cabin was fully engulfed in flames. There was no sign of Hargrove or his men, nor of Ruben and the others. The wedding guests had spotted the fire and were forming a bucket line from the well to the cabin, but it was clear the structure couldn't be saved. Katherine dismounted and ran toward them, desperate for news of Ruben. "He's not back yet," Mrs. Jensen told her, understanding her unspoken question. "None of the men have returned from checking the fence." Relief flooded through Katherine. Ruben wasn't in the burning cabin. But where was he? And where were Hargrove and his men? The answer came minutes later when shots rang out from the direction of the north pasture. The sheriff immediately organized the men present into a group, leaving some to fight the fire while others followed him toward the sound of gunfire. Katherine, ignoring all protests, rode with them. Her heart pounded with fear for Ruben and the others. As they approached the pasture, they could see figures moving among the trees at the property's edge. Ruben, Cooper, and the other men, exchanging fire with attackers hidden among the rocks. "It's Hargrove and at least 4 men," the sheriff assessed quickly. "They've got Ruben and the others pinned down." Without hesitation, the sheriff led their group in a flanking maneuver, coming up behind Hargrove's position. The surprise worked caught between two groups. Hargrove and his men were quickly overpowered. When the shooting stopped, Katherine rode frantically toward where she had last seen Ruben. She found him helping Cooper, who had taken a bullet to the arm. "Ruben," she cried, throwing herself from her horse and rushing to him. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," he assured her, catching her in a fierce embrace. "But the cabin, it's gone," Katherine confirmed, tears in her eyes. "But that doesn't matter, you're safe. That's all that matters." The sheriff and the others brought Hargrove and his men, disarmed and bound, to where Katherine and Ruben stood. Hargrove's face was a mask of hatred and defeat. "You're finished in Marysvale, Hargrove," the sheriff said coldly. "Attempted murder, arson, you'll be in territorial prison for years." "It was worth a try," Hargrove sneered. "That land will be worth a fortune when the silver vein is fully mapped." "Silver vein," Katherine repeated. Hargrove laughed bitterly. "You didn't know. The Geological Survey team confirmed it last month. There's a rich vein running right through your property, worth more than this whole territory." Katherine and Ruben exchanged stunned looks. If what Hargrove said was true, their modest ranch was sitting on a fortune. As Hargrove and his men were led away, Katherine turned to Ruben. "What do we do now?" Ruben pulled her close. "First, we get married, tomorrow as planned. Then we decide about the silver together." And so, on the first Saturday in December 1878, Katherine Zimmerman and Ruben Sloan were married in the Marysvale church, surrounded by friends who had become like family. The celebration afterward, held in the decorated barn, lasted well into the night, a defiant statement that no threat could break the spirit of their community. When the last guests had gone and the newlyweds were finally alone in the main house, now their shared home, Ruben took Katherine's hand and led her to the fireplace. "I have something for you," he said softly, reaching into his pocket. "I was going to give it to you tomorrow, but I think tonight is more fitting." He opened his hand to reveal her mother's wedding ring, the gold band gleaming in the firelight. "How did you save it from the cabin?" Katherine gasped. Touching the ring reverently, Ruben smiled. "I've been carrying it with me since the day Hargrove returned. I didn't want to risk losing it again." Taking her left hand, where a simple band now marked her as his wife, he gently slipped her mother's ring onto her finger above it. "Your mother's ring belongs with you, Katherine." A reminder of the love that built this place and the love that will continue to sustain it. Tears filled Katherine's eyes as she looked at the two rings on her finger, one representing her past, the other her future. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For saving my home, for believing in me, for loving me." "Always," Ruben promised, drawing her into his arms, "for all the days of our lives." Epilogue. Spring 1880. The apple trees were in bloom, their delicate white flowers a stark contrast to the vibrant green of the new grass covering the rolling hills of the Sloan Ranch. Katherine sat on the porch, watching as Ruben worked with a spirited young colt in the training corral, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly where their first child grew. The past year and a half had brought many changes to their lives. After confirming the presence of silver on their land, they had made the decision to allow limited mining operations on a small section of their property, away from the house and main grazing areas. The arrangement had brought wealth beyond anything they had imagined, but more importantly, it had been done on their terms, with strict provisions for environmental protection and local employment. The creek cabin had been rebuilt, larger and sturdier than before, now serving as a home for Johnson's son, who had become their ranch foreman. The main house had been expanded as well, with a nursery added in anticipation of the baby's arrival in the fall. Hargrove was serving a 10-year sentence in the territorial prison, his threats and schemes nothing more than an unpleasant memory. Mills had successfully defended their partnership and subsequent marriage against all legal challenges, cementing their claim to the land forever. As Katherine watched Ruben with the horses, she twisted the 2 rings on her finger, the simple band he had placed there on their wedding day, and her mother's ring above it. From near disaster to happiness beyond measure, the journey had been one she could never have imagined when she'd stood facing eviction that day in 1878. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" Ruben asked, coming to join her on the porch, his face flushed from exertion. "About how much has changed," Katherine replied, smiling up at him. "About how close we came to losing everything and how much we've gained instead." Ruben sat beside her, placing his hand gently over hers on her belly. "I think about that too. How a desperate act by Hollister, taking your mother's ring, led me to you." "It's strange how things work out," Katherine mused. "If he hadn't taken the ring, you might never have approached me with your offer." "I like to think I would have found my way to you somehow," Ruben said, brushing a strand of honey-brown hair from her face. "Some things are meant to be, Katherine." "Like us?" she asked, leaning into his touch. "Exactly like us," he confirmed, bending to kiss her softly. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Katherine thought of her parents. They would have loved Ruben, would have approved of the life she had built with him. She hoped they would be proud of how she had fought for their land, their legacy. The ring on her finger was more than gold now, it was a circle connecting past to future, a promise fulfilled and renewed with each passing day. From her mother's hand to hers, and someday, perhaps, to her daughter's, a testament to love's enduring power to overcome all obstacles. "I love you, Ruben Sloan," Katherine whispered as twilight deepened around them. "And I love you, Katherine Sloan," he replied, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Today and always." Together they watched as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced all others together, on the land they both loved, surrounded by the community that had become their extended family. In Marysvale, Utah, where the mountains met the sky and where a simple gold ring had begun a journey neither could have imagined, they had found their forever home. And in each other, they had found their forever love.